Rush Duels does a pretty good job of creating unique themes for the game, but what I really like is when cards that might seem like filler become full decks in the future. One of the most infamous examples of this is probably Berry Fresh, or I guess it's Fresh Berry now thanks to Duel Links. What started as just a tiny strawberry became a massive, nearly tier 0 threat thanks to its new support. So that just means you can really never count a card out, cause you'll never know when it'll come back to haunt you. Today's episode is about a deck that's continued to gain multiple waves of support over the years. While its entrance to the game has not been anything grand, its concept was really cool, but it was just set aside for stronger, flashier cards. However, this deck, much like its form, continued to evolve, absorbing the negative energy from its surroundings. It appeared once more years later, seeking relevance in an era that didn't accept it, a grim reflection of reality. But this time, it's different. They've always been there, always watching, and you can't look away now. It's too late. You can understand what they are, but never truly see their real form, because to do that, you'd have to accept that this has been you the entire time. Hello everyone, my name is Protagonist, you can call me Protag, and I'm back with another episode of Rush Review. This is a series where I go over decks and themes to help introduce them to people who might want to learn about Rush, or for those who might want to try something new. The Mad Fiend of Despair is a theme centered around, well, despair. But to be more specific, it's to spread despair to your opponents by giving them your monsters and taking theirs. How do they do all that? Well, let's do some introspection to find out. Starting with the OG, we have the Dead End, the Mad Fiend of Despair. By shuffling 4 monsters from your grave into the deck, you can destroy a face-up level 8 or lower monster on your opponent's field. Then, if you have 6 or more monsters with the same attribute in your grave, you can special summon a level 7 or lower monster from your opponent's grave face-up onto the field. After that, we were introduced to Deadline, the Mad Fiend of Despair. On the turn that you normal summon this card, send this face-up card from the field to the graveyard. Then you can mill 2 and you can special summon a Dead End from your grave face-up onto your field. This was the only way to cheat the card out, really, and that still wasn't enough. But that just brings us to now, with the full ensemble of chaos. Dead Heat, the Mad Fiend of Despair, checks to see if you have a Dead Core, the Mad Fiend of Despair, face up on your field. Then you can mill 3 and add a Dark Fiend from among the cards sent. This should be easy enough since most of your cards should be Dark Fiends. Deadlock, the Mad Fiend of Despair, has the continuous effect of not being able to be used for the tribute summon of a monster in attack position. Also, face-up Fiend monsters on your field lose 1000 attack. Peace Core, the Mad Fiend of Despair, on the main phase that you normal or special summon this card, lets you set a Rite of Despair or Root of Despair from your grave to the spell trap zone. And our final main deck monster is Bad End, the Mad Fiend of Despair. Shuffle 4 spells and or traps from your grave back into the deck. Then you can destroy an opponent's spell trap card. If you have 6 or more monsters with the same attribute in the grave, you can special summon a level 7 or lower monster from your opponent's grave face up onto your field. Compared to Dead End, this just feels a little bit better. It is much easier to return back row than it is to return monsters, especially when the graveyard check happens after you return the cards instead of before. But that's only a taste of despair. As the subconscious fuses with reality, it forms new ways to fear. Dead Core, the Mad Fiend of Despair, is a ritual monster that allows you to fusion summon a Dark Fiend with 2400 defense by sending monsters from the hand and or field to the grave as material. So let's see our options. Lock Core, the Mad Fiend of Despair, needs Dead Core and Deadlock as material. This card can't be destroyed by card effects and can't be tributed for a tribute summon. Also, face-up non-fiend monsters on your field lose 2000 attack. Heat Core, the Mad Fiend of Despair, is created by fusing Dead Core and Dead Heat. When you shuffle 4 monsters from your grave into the deck, you can then special summon a level 9 or lower monster from your opponent's grave face-up onto your field. Then you can special summon a Fiend-type monster from your grave to your opponent's field in face-up defense position. While getting one of your opponent's monsters is already strong, being able to give your opponent one of your monsters is even better. Give them Deadlock and now your opponent can't easily remove it, and any other monsters they play will lose 1000 attack. But if you send Lock Core instead, it's even harder to remove and will debuff your opponent even more. Such despair. And finally, we have the End, the Mad Fiend Deity of Despair. Fused using Dead End and Bad End, shuffle 6 monsters from your grave into the deck. Then you can destroy up to 2 cards on your opponent's field, and you can special summon a monster from your opponent's grave face up to your field. Honestly, the name fits the effect. And so, with the beasts out of the way, let's see what else we have access to in order to spread the pain. Despair and Desire, on a turn that you haven't activated this card, asks you to mill 2 cards. Then you can special summon a level 3 or 8 Dark Fiend monster with 1200 defense from your hand face up to the field. If you have a Dead Core, the Mad Fiend of Despair on your field, you can add a Dark Fiend monster from your grave to your hand. And of course, you're going to need some ritual spells to make your gateway into the fusions. Rite of Despair allows you to ritual summon Dead Core, the Mad Fiend of Despair by sending face-up fiends from your field to the grave whose total levels equal 3 or more as material. Root of Despair also lets you ritual summon Dead Core, the Mad Fiend of Despair by sending fiends from your hand to the grave whose total levels equal 3 or more as material. Then you can send the top 2 cards of your deck to the graveyard. And finally, we have an Encounter with Despair. When your opponent normal or special summons a monster, you can activate this trap card. Special summon a Dark Fiend with 1200 or 2400 defense from your hand or grave to your opponent's field in face-up defense position. Then you can destroy a face-up level 8 or lower monster on your opponent's field. This is just another way to give one of your locks to your opponent. But is it enough? Thankfully, we can utilize other fiends that help spread the darkness and engulf our opponents in shadow. I mean, I say that, but there actually aren't that many useful fiends that we can add to the deck. Archfiend Shaman can provide draw power when needed. By sending a Dark Fiend from your hand to the grave, you can draw a card. Then you can reduce the level of a face-up level 3 or higher monster on your opponent's field by 2 for the turn. This does synergize well with playing this plus the Dead End so that you can hopefully destroy a monster that might be too high of a level, but I think the card draw is just more useful overall. Archfiend Warrior checks to see if you have another face-up fiend on your field. Then you can mill 3, and if there's a level 6 fiend among the cards sent, you can draw a card. Once again, we're really just here for the mill, but if we do hit a level 6 fiends, I mean, that's just a bonus. Royal Rebel's Phaser can send itself to the grave, and if you have a face-up level 7 or higher fiend on your field, you can then special summon a level 7 or higher fiend from your graveyard to the field in face-up defense position. This helps you get either Bad End or Dead End, and if you have the Dead Core already on the field, then you can easily fusion summon into the end. Alright, so here's the deck list we're working with today. The main goal of this deck is actually to get perfect lethal. The main way to do that is through using Sworn Supporter, and the way that happens is because when you use Dead End and Bad End to make the end, you are leaving the Dead Core on the field. So Dead Core plus any other monster that you might have, you can tribute summon into the Sworn Supporter, use Sworn Supporter effect to revive either Dead End or Bad End, since they both have 2500 attack, and 2500 plus 2000 plus the 3500 is exactly 8000 life points. So there you go, perfect lethal. It's not really going to happen that way. You're probably going to get some damage in between. So either way, if you get that perfect board, you're basically going to win the game. There you go. All right, so let's actually jump into what the deck list is. 2 copies of Sworn Supporter, we have 3 copies of Dead End, 3 copies of Bad End. We are running Caius the Shadow Monarch here. It's really good removal, and it is a level 6 fiend, so it can get picked up or can get activated for Archfiend Warrior. So there you go. Speaking of, 3 copies of Archfiend Warrior, 3 copies of Archfiend Shaman. We have 3 copies of Lichy because Lichy is just too good. It's a ritual deck, kind of, so you gotta add it. And, you know, it actually brings back your only ritual monster, so in case you have to summon it multiple times. So actually, it's even better. I'm running 2 copies of Deadlock, 3 copies of Dead Heat, and 3 copies of Deadline, and only 2 copies of Peace Corps. You would think I would add more, but Peace Corps is kind of weird if you don't have your ritual spells in the graveyard, so you know it's fine. And honestly, you're gonna get the Dead Core out regardless. It's not that hard to do, but it's just nice that you have other ways to get it back. For the spells, we are running 3 copies of Despair and Desire. Pot of Greed is our legend spell because who doesn't love drawing cards? And for our ritual spells, we are running 3 copies of Rite of Despair, but only 2 copies of Root of Despair. I just find that 6 is way too bricky, and you know, while you do want to be able to ritual summon a lot, it's not good when your entire hand is just ritual monsters, so just keep that in mind. For defensive options, we are running 3 copies of Star Salvation Shield and then 1 copy of Storming Mirror Force. So nothing too special here. Our extra deck, the only ones that matter are 3 copies of The End, 3 copies of Lock Core, 3 copies of Heat Core, and 3 copies of Dead Core. So yeah, ignore that I have Medustar in here. That's literally nothing. It's just to round out the extra deck. For our side deck, it's just things that I find that would be helpful when I was going up against some of these decks. For our side deck, there isn't anything too surprising here, but there is one addition that I want to talk about. We are running a copy of Jinzo, we are running Elemental Hero Prisma, 3 copies of Lore Limey, 3 copies of Curse of the Rising Light, 2 Overrush Storms, 1 True Nade, and here's the new card, Departure Zone. So this is a new card that came with the set, and I kind of want to talk about it. It looks really good, and I just added it here because I thought it'd be fun. Activate this card by sending the top 2 cards of your deck to the graveyard, except during the first turn of the player going first. While this card is face up on the field zone, this card cannot be destroyed by card effects, and during the draw phase of a player that has a card in their field zone, if they would draw until they have 5 cards in their hand for their normal draw, instead they would draw until they have 6 cards. So, I mean, hey, drawing 6 is pretty nice, so, you know, that's not a terrible idea. I haven't really played too much with this card in the deck, but I'm sure there's going to be decks that really love to have this extra resource. And then finally, we have Compulse and Shiny Shady because they're my favorites. What else? Now with that all out of the way, let's jump into some games and see what we got. Our first game is against Spark Hearts. I Shaman to pitch Shaman and draw a card. Despair and Desire special summons the Bad End, and I set the Star Salvation Shield to pitch the Shaman on the field. My opponent starts with Pite and hits nothing. Then they Fiarma and also hit nothing. I'm having trouble with my fields being destroyed makes Passion Makma, and a second Fiarma gets the ritual spell to make Passion Girl, who destroys the Bad End. Passion Makma hits for 2600 and they pass turn. I start with Peace Core to get Root of Despair and use it immediately to make Dead Core. Warrior comes out to mill cards and I tribute it and Peace Core for Dead End. Dead End destroys the Passion Girl and brings her onto my field so I can use her effect to destroy the Makma and hit for 4500. Next turn, Pike gets Spark Hearts Girl and Familiar pitches Girl and Leave It to draw 2. Another Leave It gets the field's ritual spell. Holy Water makes Passion Girl but also destroys Dead Core with the additional effect. Passion Girl destroys Dead End and gets used to make Passion Makma, and they set a card before clearing over the Passion Girl. Thankfully, Pot of Greed saves my hand a little as I Peace Core to get Rite of Despair to make Dead Core. Deadline sacks itself to make Dead End, and I ritual summon Lock Core onto my side of the field. I get another Dead End thanks to Deadline, and I set Star Salvation Shield again before using Dead End to at least remove Leave It before ending the turn. I use Shield right away before my opponent goes to main. They activate Studio, which sucks, and Special Anesh to mill and get Hat. Fiarma gets her ritual spell back to make a second Passion Makma, which sucks. Hat gets Fiarma back and they tribute it for Makma, who uses their effect to turn Dead End and gets Sparks in hand to burn me for 1400, which sucks. Thankfully, they can only hit over the Lock Core and it's back to my turn. Peace Core gets Right again and I make Dead Core. Dead Heat activates to mill and gets me a Bad End, which I then use with Dead End to make the End. I tribute over Dead Heat to make Caius to destroy their own studio, removing their protection, and tribute over Caius and Dead Core to make Sworn Supporter. The End finally gets to use its effect and removes both Makma and summons one of them onto my field. Then I go into battle and just hope that their trap isn't a Mirror Force, which it wasn't as they activate Curtain of Sparks, and that's just not enough to save them. This next duel is against a post-ban list Defiant Soul deck. I start with Root of Despair to make Dead Core, and Dead Heat mills and gets me a Peace Core. Then I ritual summon Heat Core while the Peace Core gets back Root before I tribute it for Caius and set another card. My opponent starts with Catwall's Choice and gets Squall. Sophrase gets tributed for Gygas before ritual summoning into Gygas Velgar and destroying one of my face downs. Gifor gets played and gets Gygas back onto the field, but that's really it as they hit over my Heat Core with Gygas Velgar. On my turn, I Peace Core to set Root again, but I use Right on my field to make the Dead Core. Deadline gets Dead End and I use the effect to remove the Gygas. Then I tribute both Dead Core and Caius for Sworn Supporter to revive Heat Core and move in to clear the board. They play Lichy to send Gygas Velgar back and add Necromaid Resize to their hand. Lantern sets Stitch on their field and they use both monsters to make Necromaid Lurker. Lurker effect removes my back row and burns me for 700. Then Resize makes Ready, who bounces Heat Core, and they set a card before playing Squall to make Gygas Velgar and set another card before hitting over the Dead End. I summon the Peace Core, but they have Treacherous Trap Hole, which destroys all my monsters. Great. I Lichy to return a Dead Core and get a Root of Despair in hand. I use that to make Dead Core and play Dead Heat to mill and get Bad End. I tribute both Dead Heat and Lichy to make Bad End and use its effect to remove the back row and special summon Necromaid Ready onto my field, letting me use its effect to bounce Gygas Velgar and open their board to my attacks. GG's. So as you can see, it's a lot easier to win without having to do the whole Deadlock or Lock Core stuff. If you can pull it off, great. But then you start to realize that most of the top decks have ways to remove the lock naturally, so it just doesn't make sense to focus there. But overall, the deck is really fun. For some of the reasons I mentioned earlier, I don't see this being top tier, but it can definitely sneak some wins in if you get some good hands. Anyway, that's it for me today. Thank you all so very much for watching. Please like the video if you enjoyed it, comment below on what deck you might want to see next, and of course subscribe if you haven't already. This is Protagonist signing out for today, and I will see you all next time. Peace.